Yeah, it started. I can edit out stuff if you mess up, so don't feel the need to always get it perfect, you know. Yeah.
Okay, great.
I've done that. I
Nice.
actually did the same thing with another student who also got a 517. So
Yeah, and that's what you got too, right?
really funny. Yeah.
So it seems like you're spreading the love.
Yeah, spreading the love, exactly. But
Nice.
I mean, yeah. Hey everyone, my name is Josh. Welcome to my channel. And here I have another student who scored a 517. This is Ellie.
Hello.
Yeah. What did you get when you first started off with me? Out of curiosity, like what? I don't know if
I
you remember, like your
Oh yeah. I
scores
think
and
I
all that.
remember why I was looking for some help, and it was because I had gotten like consistently 509s and 510s. And then I felt like I was plateauing, and I felt like I had been studying for so long, and it wasn't really content that I was having issues with because you could always do more content. It really was like strategy on the exam. And so I reached out to Josh, and I remember that the first thing he told me was, go through every single question and make a list of what you got wrong and specifically why and how you can make sure you don't do it again. And it was honestly one of the best pieces of advice I had ever gotten.
It seems like you really took that to heart because
Yeah.
what did you end up getting on your real test? You know,
I ended up getting a 517 just like Josh.
at the same
So
school.
that
Okay.
was one of the best parts of, working with him. Obviously, was the results. Whatever method he's using, it's working.
Yeah, and I have your breakdown here. And for Chem Phys, you got a 130, which is really
Mhm.
good, 96th percentile. And then for cars, you got a 129, which is 95th percentile. And then for biochem, you got a 128, 82nd percentile. And then psych soc, you got a 130, which is 92nd percentile. To get overall a 517, 94th percentile, which is the exact same score I got in percentile range. That's really, really good.
Exactly. I'm trying to think another piece of advice that I really liked was when you were telling me to look for the question stem. I don't want to give away all your secrets on your YouTube channel.
Go ahead, honestly. I mean, more advice. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Looking for the question stem, like what are they trying to quiz you on? Because once you know what they want, what information they want from you, it can guide you to the right answer. And that honestly was another great piece of advice because once I knew, oh, this is what they're actually asking, it helps you find the traps way faster.
For sure. No, don't feel
Yeah.
free. Don't feel the need to hold everything back, honestly, because I mean, truthfully, this advice is really helpful. But
Mhm.
honestly, I think when it comes to tutoring, there's only so much we could really say, and
True,
you have to apply it to that specific, scenario. Because a lot of people
true.
they could or could not understand what we're trying to give as advice, which is wonderful, but it really works best when you actually apply it to like a legit MCAT passage or question stem.
Yeah, and specifically a passage you're struggling with and you can talk about it. Yeah, that's true.
100%. Yeah. So what was it like going like improving, from a 509 to a 517?
Yeah, so actually it was kind of a crazy ride, and I think this is something that everybody says, which is that the full-length exams on the official AAMC full-length exams are just a little bit, I don't know if it's harder necessarily, or maybe like the score is deflated a little bit, something around there because I got like a 518 on one of them, and then I mostly was getting 513s. And then on the unscored one, when I went online and I used one of those like conversion tools, it said that I had gotten a 509. But yeah, when I was that day, I was really upset. And I think for that one, to be quite honest, I had not slept well. I was not. You also have to plan what you're going to eat on that day and what your caffeine intake is going to look like, and you need to sleep well the day before and like be in the mood to take an exam and things like that. And so when I was walked into the exam, I was expecting to get around what I had been test or hoping to get what I was testing, which is a 513. And I wanted to be able to replicate that 518, but I knew that that might not be, the reality of things. But then I think what ended up happening is that those exams, the scores are a little bit deflated. And so that is something I would tell people who are studying for the MCAT not to get super discouraged by, even though the questions themselves are extremely representative of the actual exam. I do think because everything is based off of the curve, like you can't predict the curve. You don't know who else is taking the exam on the same day as you. So you actually don't have that good of an idea of your score until you take it. You can get within a range of a couple points, but I think you can't know the actual score until you're
Yeah, it's so
on
true.
game day.
That was I mean, for me, I guess when I took the AMCs, I thought that they were fairly predictive of what you would get on the
Mhm,
real exam because
mhm.
I remember on my AMC test 3, I got a 516, and then AMC test 4, I actually got a 520 on it. So my real
Oh,
test, it
wow.
was a 517. It fell in between the two. So
Yeah, same, 513, 518, something in between.
100%.
Exactly.
And I think since I last saw you, you hadn't taken your test yet. So what was your test day experience like? How did you how did where did you
Oh,
take your
yeah.
test center? Was it like an hour away, 5 minutes from your house? Like
It was,
what
probably
happened?
20 to 30 minutes away from where I live. I I originally was gonna take it much farther, but then I panicked and I was like, I don't know if I'm because I don't have a car. Even though I can drive, I don't have a car. I panicked and I said, I don't know if I'll be able to get an Uber. I live in Boston. I don't know if this will mean anything to some people. I didn't want to take an Uber all the way to Woburn, so I moved my testing day once it became available, which I guess is another tip for some people, to Cambridge. And so then I took an Uber to Cambridge because those are easier to get between Boston and Cambridge. And then I also went the day before and I this time I borrowed a car, I drove myself, and I explored the area so that way on game day, I didn't have to panic about trying to find the testing center, which also I think is very good advice that Josh gave me because had I not done that, these testing centers are in the most random places because it's not like a McDonald's or like, a TJ Maxx where they're very easy to find. They're always in the most random places. Like even though it was in a mall, in a parking, in a plaza with like lots of parking, it was still they still managed to hide it because it's amongst a bunch of office spaces. So I went ahead, and that way on the day of, I could focus on, getting there, thinking about the exam, calming myself down, being ready. Another really random tip that helped me, I don't know if it'll help other people's, I did not drink coffee. I specifically drank like caffeinated teas. Maybe it's a scam, maybe it's placebo, but it felt like the caffeine was coming more steadily, so it wasn't like jolting me, and I didn't have to use the bathroom during Chem Phys because the waiting period before the exam is like, depending on how many people are there, like 30 to 40 minutes. So you don't want to be, and they're pretty strict about when you can go to the bathroom.
Wow. Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember my testing, on my test day, at least for the 517, I remember I had to drive an hour away from my house because the test date that I got, at least since I'm in Los Angeles, California, and test
Oh,
spots
yeah.
fill up really fast here.
Yeah,
The
they do. Because I thought about going back to California to test, and I was like, no, forget that. I'll stay in Boston
Oh yeah, yeah, because you're
because
from
it's so,
Anaheim, so yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it filled up really fast in California. So the place I had to take it from, take it in was called Westlake Village, which is like in the San Fernando Valley, very close to Calabasas. So I had to drive
Wow.
from
That's a
Whittier
very
to
long
Calabasas.
distance.
Yeah, it was an hour. So,
Wow. Yeah, that was
but the
like my
testing center was
SAT.
so small. It felt very, I don't know. I felt like I could
Yeah,
focus a lot. There was only 10 people in it.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think mine, the actual testing center was pretty small because they had multiple rooms. So each room only had like 10 people.
oh nice. That's really
Yeah, yeah.
awesome.
I actually saw someone I knew at my testing center. That was crazy. That's
All
because
right.
Boston's small.
Were
Yeah.
you also taking the MCAT or something else?
Yeah, yeah, the MCAT. They were from my college. Yeah.
You're like, hey, next
Yeah.
competition.
Actually, no, I wished her the best. I was like, good luck.
I mean,
I
no, but yeah,
I
because
think
you're thinking
something
the curve, so yeah.
that and also something I learned is, and I guess this is another piece of good advice for pre-meds, is you guys are each other's friends, not enemies. You're there to support each other, and especially because no two applicants are alike. I was friends with a lot of pre-meds at Wellesley, which is where I went, and some of us just love research, and that's our thing. Some of us have a lot of clinical experience, and that's their thing. Some of us, majored in humanities, majored in STEM. Like, they are not your competition. They're there to support you throughout the process, and if you have the exact same resume as one of your friends, one of you is doing something wrong. So I
Yeah,
like to think that my fellow pre-meds are not my enemies. They're there to support us.
no, for sure. But it's a competition. I was joking.
No, no, no. It
It's
wasn't a
true.
lecture for you. That was a lecture for you to add to your channel.
The channel, no, 100%.
Yeah,
Honestly, I
yeah,
used to fall in that trap too. No, because with the
yeah.
MCAT, I used to compare my progress with other people, being like, "Oh wow, said student like went from
Yeah,
like a 490 to like a 528 in like 3 months or something like that." And I was like,
I'm convinced those are scams. Every time somebody on Reddit posts like, just got a 520 something, I'm convinced most of them are cheating. The answers are online. It's not like you can't cheat on the practice exams. I, I don't know why you would do it. Because if you think about it, right, if a 517 is 94th percentile, only 6% of people who are taking the exam are getting that score. So how is it that every single post on Reddit
Yeah,
is a 522, right?
that's
So
gotta be.
either the only people who post people who are getting 522s, which also could happen, right? Like you're only seeing the top 1 or 2% because they're the ones who want to brag, or somebody's lying.
That's either one of those is true for sure.
Yeah, so don't let it discourage you. The only thing that I like Reddit for is like sometimes you have a very specific question on like a specific question. You can be like, okay, FL3 section biochem question 4, what did you think? And then some people have like mnemonics, for example, if you need help finding a mnemonic or whatever. That's the only thing I would use Reddit for, but the rest is don't use it.
No, 100% agree. Yeah. I think I always took Reddit with a grain of salt. Now, I will say Reddit did have some good resources like these users called Miles Down and Jack Sparrow. I'm not sure if you ever used them,
I
but they
really like the miles down decks. I didn't end up using Jack Sparrow as much because I think Jack Sparrow is best for cars, right?
he
Uh,
does everything, but
does
actually I've never
everything.
really used his deck much either, in all
Yeah.
honesty. Yeah.
Yeah. But I did really like the milestone. I think, yeah, another piece of advice is even if you're struggling and plateauing with the actual exam, just doing a little bit of flashcards every day. Because especially for me personally, maybe other people are different. I did not take psychology in undergrad. I took it in high school as an AP course, so I was not fresh on it. I also did not take sociology, so these concepts I did not learn about them in class. So everything I learned, a lot of it was either through the Khan Academy document or the Khan Academy videos or from the Mile Down deck, and just having a little bit of exposure to those concepts every single day, especially the new concepts, made it so that when I was taking the full length test, I was like, "Oh, I recognize that. I remember that. I saw a flashcard on it."
That makes
Yeah.
sense. That's really awesome. Yeah, I really love Miles Down. There was one section called Essential Equations, and I just
Yes.
hammered that section again and again and again because for Chem Phys, you scored very high. It's actually your highest section according to percentile.
Yeah.
Just like the same with me. I got like a 131 in Chem Phys. I remember in Chem Phys, a big reason why I did so well in that section was because I used these formulas to justify my answers. I don't know if
Exactly,
you did
because
the
that's
same
usually
thing.
what they're testing you on is the formula. Like, come back to the question stem. Yeah. The formula and then also, unit conversions. There's a lot of, like,
Mhm.
converting units.
Yeah, sometimes I wouldn't know the formula, but the units would save my life.
Mhm. Exactly, same here.
100%. I'm also curious about your car score. I really wanted to ask
Oh,
you
yeah.
something about your cars because you did
Yeah.
very well in cars. I got like, I think a 71st or 72nd percentile. It's not bad, but you did
Uh-huh.
way better, of course, given that you got 95th. Were you always this good at cars?
Unfortunately, in the advice column, yes. That's always been my strong suit ever since I was a little girl, when I would take, state standardized tests for reading comprehension, the SAT, it has been able to come naturally to me. Um, but I don't think I necessarily was born with this innate CARS ability. I think it's just because 'cause I'm a big reader. And so I don't really know the science behind like reading books and that making you good at cars because no one's quizzing you on the books you read for fun. So maybe that's not the explanation. Maybe my brain just works that way and I got lucky. But yeah, unfortunately for cars, and as Josh can tell anyone, it was not predictable what I would get in cars. Like I wasn't consistently getting 95th percentile. I went from 95th to 70th to one time on a practice test I got like everything except for one question correct. And it really did depend on A, how well I slept, and B, um, how much I was focusing on the questions. Because if I just went by gut feeling the entire time, it would be very variable. But if I used certain specific strategies, namely, make sure every single answer that you pick is supported by a quote in the passage, because even the reasoning beyond the text questions, which you would think aren't going to be supported by quotes, are supported by the passage. And another thing that helped me was do not pick the answer that you think is right, because sometimes I would fall into that trap. I'm like, that sounds more reasonable to me. Pick the answer that the author would pick because they're the ones who they're quizzing you about, right? It's not like, oh, I like that answer. It's the author who is talking about this answer. So once I was able to employ those strategies, it became a little bit less variable and based on my mood and a little bit more, okay, I can consistently get in the 90 something percentile.
That's really fantastic advice. Yeah. It seems like with cars, I do see somewhat of a correlation of people like really loving reading and doing well in that section. And perhaps maybe it's
Mhm.
because reading is a skill that you need to build up, which is what you do
Maybe.
because you told me you were reading like mystery novels for fun, right? Or
Oh,
something.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that was only this year. This year I got into my mystery novel era because one of my friends really likes them, and so he kept recommending them to me. But usually I'm very into fiction. They don't have to be very intellectual books. Like I think that's another thing that people think is that they have to be very intellectual books. So I was reading like fantasy genres, I was reading thrillers, I was reading a lot of like realistic fiction, like just stories of people's lives and things like that. I obviously have read a little bit of everything, including YA, romance, but it's not that I'm sitting here reading Crime and Punishment every single day. That's not necessary to study for cars. And if reading is something you enjoy, it's a great break and brain teaser for the MCAT. But not that you should do everything for the MCAT.
For sure, 100%. It's because you genuinely like it, and yeah, there's something
Yeah,
you.
exactly.
I think there is something like valuable about reading books, though. That I mean, it's going to
Exactly.
help in these tests in that regard.
Exactly. Like I said, I don't really understand the science behind reading a book and then being good at being quizzed on what you read, but I'm sure this, like you said, it's a skill that is being developed every time you do it because you're creating your opinions on what you read too, right? Very few people just read something and go, okay, I read that. I mean, ChatGPT does that, but humans are creating opinions on what they've just read, and so you may not think that you're like developing a skill when you're reading for fun, but you definitely are, especially when you talk about it with your friends and like analyze what you both saw.
100%. No, that's some fantastic advice. I asked you specifically about cars because a lot of people, I don't think I'm really too much in a place where I could give advice about cars, but you definitely are, so
Yeah,
you're better
thanks.
on it. Yeah,
Yeah, no, it's I actually this is I don't know if you want to include this in the video, but a
sure.
funny anecdote about cars was sometimes when I was so tired of the MCAT and I was so tired of like science and psychology and chemistry, whatever, I would have so much fun reading the cars passages because I found them interesting that I'd be like, maybe I should be studying what the cars passage is about. Why am I doing this on an exam for medical school? But then, that was me not wanting to study for the MCAT.
So you read cars for fun, even though you weren't studying?
No, no, not for fun. No. Like while I was studying, I would do a cars passage and I would read the passage and I would get so invested in what it was saying that
Oh, I
I'd forget
see.
that I was studying. Because I still remember there was this one passage, and it was talking about like medieval and middle age England, and it was talking about like all of the lore and the history of middle aged England, and it had perfectly coincided with this fantasy novel I had just read, and I thought that the author came up with all of those terms for her fantasy world that was based off of middle-aged England. And then when I read about it in the MCAT passage, I was texting all my friends. I was like, "You guys, I can learn something from my MCAT passage. Like, she did not come up with any of this. It was all based in history." And so I
Wow,
was consistently sending fun facts from the cars passages to my friends.
that's awesome. So you were invested based off of the fact
Yeah,
that it related.
yeah.
Wow,
Yeah, and that's not just true for cars, that's true for especially, I majored in biology. You and people always complain about biology, like it's hard to memorize things, it's hard to brute memorize things. And I say, well, it's not hard if you're interested, right? People will always remember what they're interested in. And so if you find the human body interesting, if you find, you know, for example, whatever where you're studying interesting, then it will stick in your brain. It really will. Like if you're not interested, that's when it won't stick.
that's really funny you say that because I promise you, the other MCAT 517 score I interviewed, her name's Rachel. We
Okay.
already did a video and it's on YouTube, but she literally said the exact same thing about cars. You have to pretend like it's the most interesting thing that you've ever read because then you
Okay.
start paying
Yeah.
attention and then
Yeah.
yeah, you get good at it.
So there's a trend.
It's a trend, and that's what I'm trying
Yeah.
to identify here.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because like the details will stick in your brain because you don't have enough time to go back and reread the whole passage for every single question. So if you're thinking like, oh, I remember they said something about that, it's much easier to. Also, mapping out the passage. I like to highlight what I think they're going to ask me a question on or read the questions first.
100%. Yeah, for cars, I think this may have contributed to me getting a little lower, but not that much. But I would always try to make time to go back and forth between the passage. But like you said,
Mhm.
you would only try to remember, I guess, where the info is stated, and then try to remember small details. And you would go back, but
Mhm.
you wouldn't spend too much time, right?
Yeah, and you don't necessarily. I mean, obviously, I would remember what I found interesting, which wasn't always what the questions were on. You
Mhm.
don't necessarily have to know what the info is, you have to know where it is. So you have to be like, "Okay, paragraph 1 is about this, paragraph 2 is about this." So when they ask you, "Okay, something, something, something about this," you're like, "Oh, I remember that that was paragraph 5." So that way you're not wasting your time reading paragraphs 1 through 4 to
Oh,
get to
cool.
paragraph 5.
That
Yeah.
is awesome advice. Yeah, I think I found that out about cars, and they started doing better, overall.
Yeah.
It's about
Yeah,
the where
exactly.
the evidence is located, not so much what it is. So you could just go back and find it and reread it really quickly.
Exactly, and I did do, a couple print and review classes before I found out that they were not helpful at all. But something that they recommended was on your whiteboard mapping out the passages. So like paragraph 1 has intro, paragraph 2, and if you can do it really quickly while you're reading, it can be helpful. I ended up not having to do that, but
Okay. That you didn't keep that
to help
spreadsheet.
someone.
Okay.
Huh? I mean, I read faster than I write, so it for me it would just slow me down. But for somebody, if they are also a slow reader, maybe it'll help to write as they read what they're looking at.
Yeah. And I'm a little curious on your actual test day experience,
Mhm.
which section did you find like the easiest or the hardest? I don't know if you remember
Oh,
struggling with
yeah.
a particular one on
I would
test
say
day.
my hardest section was biochem because it's right after lunch.
Mm,
I made sure to drink my energy drink during the lunch, so to try and combat the crash, and I also tried to eat, like, just enough to get me through, but not have, like, a full meal so that I wasn't, completely exhausted, but yeah, it was kinda hard for me to focus on that. I was hyped up on adrenaline, so it helps to push through that post-lunch slump. Um, but like I said, good thing I like biology was my major, so it kinda helps you push through when you like what you're reading about. What was I gonna say? I was gonna give one more piece of advice. Oh, my other piece of advice is the testing centers offer earplugs, and it was the best thing in the world. They're the cheap foam ones that don't really fit that well, but having earplugs because people are clicking. They're not that loud, but they're clicking, they're breathing, they're moving. So for me, the earplugs just and they didn't offer them. I had to ask because I had read it on the website. I said, "Oh, can I have some? Can I have those earplugs?" And they were like, "Oh yeah."
they gave it to
So
you. That's really awesome.
yeah. So if somebody, I mean, some people, for example, some people like to work in cafes. Not me. I hate the noise. I like working in libraries. So if you're the kind of person who likes to work in a library with silence, um, earplugs, and you can't bring your own. You have to ask them for
Oh, of
theirs.
course, because they don't want you, sneaking in the answer to question
Exactly.
whatever. Yeah.
Putting putting recording devices. Yeah, exactly.
Sure. Yeah, people can do a lot of interesting things. That's why they're always like, yeah, checking, you know.
Exactly. They check your ID before you leave the room every single time.
Wow. Oh, wait,
Yeah.
interesting. Because for me, I remember they had to scan my palm, I guess,
They
before.
yeah, they did that too. They
Oh,
did
they did
both.
that too. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because.
Yeah, I didn't know that we had unique signatures, but I guess we do.
Mhm. So if you have to go to like the bathroom or anything like that, honestly, that's the time to get like that scratch, that laminated sheet of paper, um, from
Oh
test.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
use that most on Chem Phys, and then
Me too.
on
Me too.
Biochem because Chem Phys is super math heavy. So
Yeah, exactly. Biochem, maybe to keep track of some things. Like I don't think I had pedigrees on my actual exam, but on practice exams, when there were pedigrees, like you want to be able to draw the like Punnett squares and stuff. So that's good for having it. Also, I this is really random. It might be test center by test center. The pen that they gave me was very fine. I enjoyed writing with them. It was like because I was using the wet erase ones that you can buy on Amazon, and by the end, I guess they gave you new. I don't know. The tips would get really dull, so my writing was really big. But in the actual exam, it was like it was a nice thin pen, easy to use.
that's
So
really
I didn't mind the laminated sheet at all. It felt like writing on paper.
for sure. I'm a little
Yeah.
curious too. Out of all the sections on the exam, which one did you see like the biggest improvement in of like the four you've taken from your
Oh,
sets up to the real thing?
yeah.
Remember.
I think, well, the biggest improvement statistically would be in psych soc. Um, I'm not entirely sure what the official secret is for why I improved, because I remember when I was coming to you, I was probably getting, like, I think my diagnostic exam, I was 50th percentile or something, no, 30th percentile,
Oh,
with a little bit of while, because I like I said, I don't take those classes, like, I was walking in kinda blind, and
mhm.
then with some miles down deck and some Anki and whatever, I think I got it up to 50th, and then I think when I started working with Josh, I think I was kind of hovering around 50th, and then I was, like, occasionally getting 70th because I was using UWorld, and maybe this is just me, but I did the whole UWorld question bank, and the psych soc content that UWorld was doing felt different than the official content. Maybe it's just because there was so much content to go through that, like, I was seeing new words all the time on the official question banks. So then you and I had to sit down actually a couple of times and compare. Like, I was getting confused, right? I'd be like, okay, what's the difference between this and this, this and this? Like, it's not enough to just have recognition of like, oh yeah, that's what that means, but you have to be able to contrast it and say why it's different from this and this. So I remember you and I would sit down and like talk about scenarios in which why one of these things was different from another and compare the two. And that was really helpful for me. And I think after that, I was able to get it up. What was it at the end? The
It was a
percentile?
130. So that's really good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so then, being able I was able to get it up a lot higher from there, because I think from where I was coming from, which was a very much like a blank slate situation where I didn't take the classes, didn't really know what was happening. Um, brute memorization of the vocab got me so far, but like true understanding was able to get me to the second half. So I think that kind of is a really good demonstration of what works, I think, on the MCAT, considering I was coming from pretty much 0.
100%. Because I did feel like when it came to improving in sex social, personally, I did use miles down, and there were a lot of
Mhm.
cards that were very helpful. But there were
Mhm.
some cards, for example, that his definition was correct by technical
Yeah.
sense, but I just couldn't understand it for the life of me. So
Yeah, I
I
would have
put a
to
lot of
watch the
figures.
linked videos. I would have to watch the linked videos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember a good example that I like to use all the time is reaction formation, which, to
Yeah.
be honest, I don't really have a good grasp on the definition, but I could explain it by example. In which, for example, if you have like a couple like kids playing outside, and there's like a girl who likes a guy, and then her friends know about it, her friends are gonna tease her by saying, "Ooh, you like this guy," and then she's gonna
Mm,
immediately defend herself by saying, "No, I don't. He's stupid. He's ugly. He's um." He's horrible, stuff like
mhm,
that. So technically, the definition of reaction formation would be that you say the opposite things, because this girl, she's saying that this guy's ugly, stupid, even though she likes him. So she's kind of despising him, even though she likes the guy, clearly. And that's how I know reaction formation, by that example. And I think psych soc, you just have to learn things that way, because if you can explain it by example, it's just a much more powerful definition.
mhm, exactly. I think you actually gave me I think you actually explained that phrase to me because I think I got a question on reaction formation wrong in a practice. I think we had this exact conversation.
Yeah, it's a tricky, honestly, like a term like that is very low yield. You don't see it on the psych soc portion very much at all. So when it does come up, it can get super confusing. And yeah, you just need, honestly, I just think that an example is a better way to explain it than the definition. Because I could
Yeah,
tell you the
yeah,
definition, but it may not make too much sense in that regard. I don't know.
yeah.
It didn't make sense to me when I first saw it. So
No, and I think that's true for a lot of psych soc is that the examples are more helpful than
100%, they're
anything.
more explanatory, and they can help you tell the difference between like very small things, because people will get
Yeah,
things like conformity and groupthink mixed up quite
yeah,
a bit.
exactly.
100%. Yeah. What about like sections like Chem Phys? You saw like a pretty decent improvement in that too, right?
Yeah. So Chem Phys was interesting because my personal weakness is chemistry, specifically organic chemistry. So uh, I guess one thing to note is that organic chemistry is not like you need to just have a very surface level understanding for the MCAT. Um, like for example, one of the things I struggled with in my courses was synthesis, and no one's going to ask you to do a synthesis on the MCAT. So I think I had to take a step back and just relearn organic chemistry from a surface level standpoint. And also, this was actually where I had to get psychological with myself, battle my own anxieties surrounding chemistry, because I have struggled with chemistry so long, since I was in high school, that it kind of gets me stuck in this loop of, well, I already suck at this, so what's the point of studying it? I'm just going to take the L every single time and being like, okay, no, Ellie, if you want the score you want, you need to relearn chemistry, start from the beginning. And actually, I before I started asking Josh for help, I had another tutor who his whole his whole college experience, he was very good at chemistry. And so when it came to the organic chemistry specifically, because that was his specific expertise, he was very helpful with just pretending like I never took orgo in the first place and just starting again. I think if someone asks for advice, if they have anxiety in a subject like chemistry, I would just say, pretend you never took those classes, pretend you never met those professors. We're starting fresh, we're starting new, and we're remembering that we don't have to go nearly in depth, as much in depth as we had to in undergrad. And it's okay to just get the basics down and get them down right. So that way, when you have to answer the question, that's all you need to use. And I remember working with Josh, there were some organic chemistry questions where you didn't even have to understand the name of the reaction. You just had to know, okay, this functional group is turning into this functional group, and that's possible. This functional group, it cannot turn into this functional group, that's not possible. You don't need to remember the names. There are a few names you need to remember, but once you get the functional groups down, you can learn a couple reaction names and then call it a day, and you can get a 130 on chem phys. Because yeah, I had a lot of anxiety surrounding chemistry, so I think realizing that the MCAT is not your undergrad classes made a big difference.
100%. Yeah. And then also, I guess, it's funny how you said that it was like you had anxiety surrounding it, and it was like
Hmm.
your biggest weakness. But then it
Hmm.
turned into your best section on the exam. I think
Yeah.
statistically, out of like the results and percentiles that are presented here. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's
and
kind of inspirational in that regard.
exactly, because once you get a couple patterns down, that's all you need, right? Is once you get a couple of, I would say the biology section has more content to cover. I think the chem phys section actually does not have that much content you need to cover. It's the same content that keeps coming back. So if you suck at one thing, you're gonna keep lowering your score.
100%. And then the thing that you were saying is that you know how you were saying about that the MCAT is not your undergrad classes. For me, I had to remind myself that the MCAT is not the SAT, because
Yeah.
when I was going into the MCAT, as some background, I didn't do that well on the SAT. I mean, I didn't do that bad either, but I just did just okay. I got like, I think, a 70th percentile when I took the
Okay.
SAT back in high school. I remember I wasn't too happy with it because I wanted to do higher, and I felt like
Mhm.
my GPA was much better than my
Mhm.
SAT score, at least in high school. But
Mhm.
yeah, so I remember I had a bit of anxiety coming into studying for the MCAT, because I was like, oh man, I was traditionally not that good at standardized tests, and I don't want this to be the same story again. And lo and behold, it was not the same story. And it's actually the first
Yeah.
standardized test I consider myself good at. I don't know if that's the case for you too. I mean, you're for sure good at it too, given we got the same score. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's actually really good advice because people have testing anxiety around just generalized standardized tests, and it's very important to say that the MCAT is not the SAT. They're very different tests. So if you struggle with standardized testing in high school, I would not assume you're going to struggle again with the MCAT because, yeah, like you said, they're very different. The SAT wasn't content based. At the end of the day, you didn't have to learn content for the SAT. You do for the MCAT.
I
You're
mean,
going to
I
say
would
something.
argue though, to some respect, the SAT kind of was. Oh my gosh, because I really hated like memorizing like a 10,000 words to only get like
Oh,
eight
we took
questions
different
right. Like,
SATs. Did you
remember,
take the one at a 2400?
see, that's the thing. When I took it too, it was changing. So
Yeah,
when I took
yeah.
it the
Did you
first
take the
time,
old one?
it was the old one, and then the second time I took it, it was the
Yeah.
new one. And honestly, I guess that's also what made it really hard too, because I mean, during the time we took the MCAT has not changed in a very long time. Maybe I should ask. I need to. Hopefully, I can do a video where I interview an older doctor who's taken the MCAT, because I believe back in the day it used to be out of like 36, not like in the
Oh, yeah.
500 scores that we have
The
now.
other the other thing I was gonna say is if you had anxiety in high school surrounding the SAT, like you were not the same person you were in high school. College changes people almost always for the better. It helps them grow, mature, get stronger. And I think if you're coming into the MCAT being like, "Oh, but I struggle with the SAT," think about all the other things you struggled with when you were a high schooler versus now. Like, you are a stronger, different person. I would not bring those anxieties into this new exam. I know it's easy to want to do that, but the more anxiety you bring with you, the more work you're going to create for yourself to have to fight through it.
100%, yeah, and, I don't know, that was kinda transformative, seeing the that score for the very first time. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I did way better than I thought I was gonna do."
Yeah, yeah. No, but I forgot that we took different SATs.
I think so, because did you take the old one or the new one too?
No, I took the new one.
New one. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was in the transition period. It was the worst time to arguably take the SAT. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree because you study for one exam, and then if you want to take it again, you have to take a different one.
Yeah, they took out vocab for the new one, and then, it was just it
Oh,
was a massive strategy change too, and thankfully, at least, according to the AMC, you guys have to keep updated with the emails, but, for now, I don't think the MCAT has really changed much at all, except
mhm,
for that I know for a fact that they throw out a couple experimental questions on,
mhm,
your tests, so but you don't know which ones they are, that's the thing. They throw out experimental questions just to see, "Okay, how many students are going to get this right or wrong, and it won't count
mhm,
towards your actual score. I know for a
mhm,
fact they do that. Probably they do like two or three of them. I don't know how
mm,
much they do. Again, I would have to work for the AMC to find out. And if I work for the AMC, I probably won't be able to tell you all this. So yeah.
exactly.
Oh man. Well, it seems like time's almost up, Ellie. But I don't know if you had any closing tips or last remarks you wanted to make about the MCAT in general or any
Oh,
session. Yeah.
uh, yeah, I would say that if this is something that you want, being a doctor is something that you want, and the MCAT seems intimidating, just taking it one step at a time, one practice section at a time, one practice exam at a time. Progress is not linear. I am the prime example of that. My first couple of full lengths were way better than the next one, which then it went like this, and then I ended up with a 517. So don't overanalyze the score or the percentile because those are relative. Do overanalyze the content of the questions, but do not overanalyze your progress or your score because that's just wasting your brain power on something that you cannot predict. And believe in yourself always because if you don't, who will?
100%. That's really
Yeah.
fantastic advice. Yeah, I would say arguably the biggest thing above all, at least when I give advice for the MCAT, is to like really worship the question stem and read it carefully. Honestly, if I make a new YouTube banner, I'm probably going to put that in my banner, like read the question carefully because it's all about, yeah, can you answer what they're really asking? It's really as simple as that. And I'd say another
Exactly.
thing too, and you probably agree with this, is that the exam it tests you on your ability to adapt to a new situation because I remember when I was in undergrad, I ended up getting a 4.0 when I was in undergrad. And the way I did that in terms of studying was I just wrote notes on everything and I rewrote my notes and it worked. But for the MCAT, I did not take notes at all. It was more about it being up here in my head rather than on a piece of paper. So
Exactly. Exactly.
awesome. Well, no, thanks so much for your time,
Yeah.
Ellie, and hopefully
Thank you,
the viewers
Josh.
get a lot out of this too,
I
especially
did.
since
I really appreciated working with you, especially because it was only the last month leading up. So it's so much. I learned so much. My score improved so much in 1 month. So who knows if I had reached out earlier, what would have happened?
that's really awesome to hear. Thanks so much, Ellie,
Yeah.
and
Thank you.
yeah, it's been a pleasure working with you,
You
100%.
too.
Yeah, and I'm so
You
glad
too.
to hear that you got the same score as me. I'm not jealous,
Yeah.
obviously. I'm really happy and excited, and you're going to be in good shape when it comes to applying this cycle. So yeah.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Bye.
I'll see you all later. I'm gonna stop the recording.